Welcome to the show, folks. This is Wrestling Changed My Life. Here we go.
I always wanted to be the hated guy. I think it went a little too far sometimes, if you've ever listened in our heyday down at Assembly Hall. But
we can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestle, because if you wrestle, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. You're listening to Wrestling Changed My Life. My guest today is Coach Boo, Mike Bukovsky, creator of the Montini Wrestling Dynasty. He led Montini to 8 team titles and created that program from the ground up. I mean, they had never even been down to state before he took over. Now they're one of the best teams in the country. Really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do, and I know you will as well, folks. Fan of the week goes to one of our SoundCloud listeners, Ryan.Lee.Miller. This individual has listened to the show a tremendous number of times over the past year, and we cannot thank you enough. If you want to support the show, I just launched a new t-shirt today. It says Saturdays are for the duels. You can buy it at our online store. Store.wrestlingchangemylife.com is the URL. Check it out. Store.wrestlingchangemylife.com. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get to the interview with Coach Boo. Coach Boo, welcome to the podcast, sir.
thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
You are one of the legends in Illinois wrestling, sir, and I'm equally as humbled to have you on the show. Let's start at the beginning. So when you were graduating North Central, did you have any idea you would one day coach a wrestling team?
Well, actually, my wrestling career at North Central College got cut a little short. I competed for 2 years and had an injury situation, and nothing major or catastrophic, but it knocked me out of competition. And I actually came back to Montini. My younger brother was here at the time, and we had a head coach, Jim Izzo, who was a IWCOA Hall of Famer, and Jim coached me, and Jim asked me to help out. He had an assistant coach who was our head football coach at the time, who had no wrestling background. So I kind of got thrown into the fire coaching wrestling, starting really my end of my sophomore year, junior year in college. And I came back on weekends and during the wrestling season to help out as much as I could. And I loved it. And, have been coaching here at Montini. This is my 36th year of coaching either football, wrestling, or, believe it or not, girls softball here at Montini. So I've been coaching a little bit of everything for 36 years. And
during that tenure, I think like 27 of those years, you worked with Coach, is it Andriano? Yeah. He was a big mentor of mine. I played football for him here, and then in college I pursued my wrestling career. But he was still a big part of my philosophy, my coaching philosophy. And when I came back to help him, he was the frost-off head coach at the time. Most coaching staffs at that time only had 2 coaches, believe it or not, back in the, mid to late 80s. So he was the assistant. And so he basically told me, hey, listen, he goes, I don't really know much about this wrestling. I love it. I see how it, helps our football guys. Why don't you run the practices? Why don't you do all this? And, I kind of said, hey, sure. So I really had a great mentor in him. And he just, really gave me a lot of tips about being professional. And of course, the head coach at the time, like I said, Jim Izzo, was awesome too. And my career was started. So I just loved it. Man, the mentors you were bumping elbows with, pretty incredible.
And I think that's a big part of why I have a lot of the feelings, or I think a lot of the responsibility issues that I feel today to young men, is because I was so heavily influenced. My wrestling career actually started in junior high. I had another IWCOA Hall of Famer, and Joe Peterson, who you might know, was the manager of the state tournament for many years. He took over after Tom Flanagan retired, and Joe Peterson was in charge of running the state tournament down at Assembly Hall, or what used to be Assembly Hall, now is the State Farm Center. But Joe coached me at Eisenhower Junior High. I started wrestling in 6th grade, and I can tell you I wasn't very good. And Joe Peterson was awesome, and took the time to give me the right amount of encouragement. Yet at the same time, I learned some tough lessons in those first couple of years that I better get my butt in shape and better start getting better. And he was just an awesome mentor for me, as well. So yes, I was very blessed to have really those three guys, as well as some other great coaches. But those three guys were really some mentors that I had that really helped shape my coaching career and really my personal life.
I mean, I can't even imagine, especially all those years you've been at one school, which is so rare. And so one of the things I want to ask you was, all these coaches are Hall of Famers, but what was the state of the Montini wrestling program when you first took over at 94? Had they won a state title? Had they ever been downstate?
No, at that time, in 1994, when I took over, Montini had been in existence for 30 years, and we had won one regional title. That was the extent of anything that we had won. And, Jim Izzo was, again, a great, great guy. And I give him so much credit because I know that during the mid-'80s, right before I came to help him in early 80s, I should say, and even after that, when I was his assistant in the late 80s and 90s, Montini went through an enrollment decline. And I know there was some whispers of possibly cutting the wrestling program. And Jim, forever will go down as really just an absolute stalwart of the Montini wrestling program, because he saved the program, and, for years, he did yeoman's work. And so I don't think his value was ever measured in state titles or wins or losses, but it was just measured as the kind of young men, that he influenced, and myself being one of them. So Jim will forever go down and as a hero of mine because of that. And so, as I took over, basically, I just wanted to take it to the next level, and I had no blueprint. As I wrestled in high school, I consider myself, and I use this word loosely, I was a slightly better than average high school wrestler. I emphasize the word slightly. I was a 2-time conference champion. I was very proud of that. I was a team captain and, had a nice record and everything, but I certainly was nowhere near elite. And I really think probably the biggest attribute that helped me in becoming a coach was the fact that I really had no talent, and I really had to work for every, little morsel of success that I got. And I think it really, helped me to understand a lot more of the nuts and bolts of a sport like wrestling, and really gave me, an appreciation for being humble and doing things the right way. So that was really instrumental in me getting into my coaching career.
And you said once you took over, you wanted to take the program to the next level. Did you have any specific goals in mind?
Well, believe it or not, I used to be, I looked at certain things when I took over the program. We were a Class A school, okay, back when it was in the 2-class system. And the teams around us that had the most success, first of all, there was Sandwich High School, and Lon Garish was the legendary coach there. And, I looked at Lon and looked at his program and really wanted to emulate a lot what he did. There was a coach up at Harvard High School named Tim Hack, who is another guy that was a huge influence on me. And I just watched him get so much out of, average wrestlers and kids that weren't that talented. And I hope I didn't just insult the whole town of Harvard. But he just was a tremendous, I just really was, a great guy. And a guy named Joe Cliff, who coached at Plano High School. and Joe was another guy who just loved wrestling. Those three guys were, to me, that was those guys that I wanted to be in. And a guy a lot more local was a guy out of Lisle High School, one of the famous Rudiger brothers, the Rudy brothers from Notre Dame fame, John Rudiger, who was another guy that we bumped heads with all the time. And really, when I took the program over, I used to have a green notebook. I still have it. It was a spiral notebook, and I used to go to meets, and I used to just pick everyone's brain, and I just wrote down things. I have things that are just, that were unbelievable, things that I witnessed about certain things with technique, certain things with how they treated, their wrestlers and warm-ups and everything like that. And I was just kind of consumed with that. And so I wrote in that book, when I got the head job, I actually said I wanted to win a state title in 5 years. And I don't know why I wrote that to this day, because I had no idea how that was going to happen. And it took us 6 years to win a title. So I feel that, I was just about on schedule with that. But it was just really, again, I've always learned things from other people, other coaches. It's been a huge part of my career.
I have to go back to the great notebook. Do you remember anything particular that you wrote down that was extra meaningful for you over the years?
Well, I think, a lot of it was when I watched those other coaches, and especially Tim Hack up at Harvard. Now, Tim was also the football coach up there. And so, I was a football coach here. And so, a lot of times we would end up scouting teams for the playoffs and things. So I would go up and watch Tim's team once or twice a year play. And I would see, again, same things that I saw this, these kids were just tough, hard-nosed kids. And one of the things I joke around with Tim about is, as we got older, at that old Plano sectional, I mean, when Montini, when I was an assistant coach, we were kind of in the middle of the pack, and we didn't have much team success. And I constantly studied them, and really him as a guy that really brought the most out of the team. And I noticed that nobody liked him. And I used to tease him about this. Anytime a Harvard kid won a close match, people would boo and all that. And a strange thing, Ryan, I don't know, I just loved that. I thought, like, this guy's so good, that people, and I joke around to Tim. I go, fortunately at Montini, we've had a few success, and I always wanted to be the hated guy. I think it went a little too far sometimes, if you've ever listened in our heyday down at Assembly Hall, but that was the way it was. And I joke around about that all the time with Tim. And I studied him and Joe and Johnny Rudiger and Lon. And I just, really think, so things I wrote were, about reactions they had, how they dealt with referees, my feelings. I talked with them about, pick their brain about practice ideas, about technique. I would always, look at certain things and scout certain teams, and then, realize why those teams were successful and what they were doing. So it was just and it was everything from, one of the things that drove me crazy is, when I started at Montini, like I really wanted to get everybody in uniform. We always had guys kind of wearing their own warm-ups and stuff. And like things like that meant something. I would watch those other teams, and, that obviously wasn't the reason they were good and they were winning, but those things go hand in hand. So I just really learned a lot from those guys. And it just, again, every once in a while, even now, I pull out that green notebook and kind of look at some of my younger, days and my little bit, I guess you'd say innocent views on certain things. And now it's a little different. Now I get a chuckle.
It's incredible that, that the programs you're talking about, the sandwiches of the world, and we're going to get into some of the rivalries you guys had.
Mm-hmm,
it's just crazy how they grew though over the years to when you retired, your rivalries might be, a national contender. I mean, And you said earlier, Montini was down in enrollment. I can't even imagine that now. I mean, Montini's like one of the premier programs across all sports in Chicago, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, the wrestling program has taken off, and Israel Martinez did a fantastic job and is one heck of a coach. And now Mike Benefiel is one of my all-time greats, obviously, that I coach, and he's gonna continue that legacy. And so I feel great about that. But it's anything that you do, you feel good about being part of the beginning. And I remember when we won our first title in 2000, that was the first state title we won in our school in any sport.
Wow.
And and it was a wrestling team. That's a big source of pride for me to this day, that the wrestling team always started everything at Montini, the wrestling roots in me. And I remember telling guys my age that I wrestled with, and even guys that were older than me and stuff, that I always wanted our kids to understand who came before them. And now they have these wonderful opportunities. And of course now, you know, you look and we've got wonderful kids and some nationally ranked kids, and you know, they work very hard, and we have a great schedule. We travel nationally and do all these things. But I always want them to remember that there were guys that came before them that never had quite those opportunities. And that's part of building a program. You know, it's part of, you know, any school, high school or college that you look at. And that was something that I always felt that I never forgot those guys. You know, I never forgot those, you know, the guys that built the bricks that were there for the foundation. And even though they weren't around to stand up on the podium and get medals and all that kind of stuff, I hope that I always, you know, made it clear that they were a big part of any success that we had.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I read that when you took the job, one of your mentors told you that, you know, a key to the program is to make the guys feel like they're part of something special, and, you know, make them feel like there's a higher standard of excellence here, kind of like a Bill Walsh type situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, how did you do that though? Like, what did you do special to implement that?
Well, you know, the first thing that I did was, you know, there was always a great amount of pride in the wrestling program. I always felt that, even as a wrestler here, but we never had, you know, the dual team concept, you know, started, I believe, in the early 80s, if I'm not mistaken. So it was just kind of around at the tail end of my competitive career in high school. And so when I started as an assistant wrestling coach, it was always like the teams that weren't really able to pull that all together, you know, you just didn't worry about that. You just coached your guys, and you wanted to get individual state qualifiers and regional, you know, champions and section and all that kind of stuff. And so what I really did was I think the number one thing I did was look at these other schools in the area and say, hey guys, that could be us. You know, we could be Lisle High School, winning regional titles every year and going downstate and getting a team trophy. Sandwich and Harvard, you know, and Plano, those sorts. That could be us. We're not that far away. We've got talent, and that was something that was really a conscious effort to do that. So, you know, I really promoted that team responsibility and that team unity. So, you know, little things, you know, we scheduled more action over Christmas break. You know, we're wrestlers. We don't take off for vacation over Christmas break. We're going to work, and we're going to compete. And towards the end of my career, you know, it probably went overboard. You know, I remember, you know, I sat, and many times, you know, in this profession as a coach, you kind of sometimes question things, and you look back and you say, my gosh, you know, I had the wrestling room open, you know, a couple of those years every single day. You know, guys would call me on Christmas Day, Coach, I need to come in and get a workout. Okay, I'll meet you there tonight. Be there at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever. You know, and it, you know, got to the point where you look back at it now and you say, oh boy, geez, did I really do that? You know, I mean, and you know, that's what it takes to be successful. And I think that's what, you know, I was able to foster that with those kids. And I think, again, it came from my, you know, humble roots of, you know, nothing ever came easy to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's what really promoted that.
I love that it was a workman-like climb too, because you made it downstate in 95, then you battled Sandwich like 2 or 3 years in a row. And then finally got your first title. I mean, what do you remember those early battles with Sandwich though, before you were battling the Carl Sandburgs of the world?
Well, you know what, it's what everybody, you know, when we would go to the sectional and we would listen and, you know, there was always Plano sectional. My gosh, that was the premier time back then. Joe Cliff, you know, when he was the head coach there, and just, it seemed like it was just, I mean, more people. You talk about Class A wrestling fans. I mean, you know this. It's still
they're diehard.
They're just unbelievable. So you'd go to Plano, and that place would be packed, you know, and it was an experience. And those were still, really, to be honest with you, some of my favorite, you know, memories of coaching was being in that gym where there was and then, you know, not only Montini was there, but, you know, the rivalry between Sandwich and Plano. These kids are, you know, they grow up 5 miles from each other their whole lives, and they're, you know, they're ready to kill each other, you know, on the mat. And then they get up and shake hands, and there's this respect with all them. And then you throw in Wilmington, you know, once Robbie Murphy got things rolling down there, they were a huge part of that I-8 success. So, it was a great atmosphere, you know, it really was. And it was, to me, it was like a hotbed of wrestling. It's something that I think is like a lot of schools. And I just started, again, wanted to always tell our kids how fortunate we were to be able to compete with those schools and to do that and to reach for them and have, you know, goals and things that we wanted to reach for. That was always just a huge part of it. And I don't know, you know, I couldn't tell you, like, there were certain big marks along my career where when we did this, boy, that was a big thing. When we did this, that really helped us. But it was just overall, like you said, it was a steady climb. It was just getting better every day, every year, every month, whatever we could. And that's really what, you know, what it became to me. It was, and, you know, really helped me that when I was at Montini, we made the football playoffs for the first time in 1981. It was the first thing that we ever won at the school. And I always had this chip on my shoulder, you know, about Montini. So it's always been a personal thing to me. Montini is always, you know, whatever sport it is, I don't care. You know, it always, we had that as that group of guys that age, you know, we got made fun of by our friends in the local public schools because we didn't win anything and this and that. So when we started to do that, it always probably a little bit unhealthily became a focus of mine. And it really is a personal thing about the school.
Well, you're talking about stories that are getting me excited, just the competitiveness in Illinois wrestling and knowing that, I mean, in 94, 95, if you would have told Providence or Mount Carmel that Montini would be battling you guys, they would have said, who the hell is that? You know, it wasn't even a thing.
No doubt about it.
And so let's fast forward to 2007. I wouldn't be doing us justice if we didn't talk about one of the greatest, you know, state dual finals, I think maybe of all time. 2007, you guys won the Clash, but Carl Sandburg got second. Did you wrestle there? What happened there? Could not figure that out.
You know, yeah, we actually, the way the Clash is set up is you get into your bracket. So we won our bracket, they won. So you get to the final 4 teams in the winner's bracket, and you're going to place 1 through 4. So we had beaten before them. I think we had beaten, my gosh, it might have been Apple Valley, Jackson, New Jersey,
Memorial.
Wasn't it? Yeah, out of New Jersey. And then another, it might have been Apple Valley out of Minnesota. And I think we beat those 2 teams. And then by virtue of the scores and everything, we had clinched the title. Sandburg had lost to those 2 teams, okay, in the round robin. So then the last round robin was we were going to wrestle Sandburg. And even if we lost that duel, we would tie 3-way with the other, and we beat the other 2 schools. So we knew we had clinched it. But that really had nothing to do with it. What the funny, unique thing about Sandburg was we beat him in the Clash because we beat the other 2 teams. We beat him by a point in the Dvorak that year, which again is a tournament setting. But in a duel, they were an extremely tough matchup for us. And I'm telling you right now, we wrestled in that duel and we just couldn't find a way to get that extra win. And I still, you know, kind of laugh about it today. I mean, they were just a better duel team than us that year. If we wrestled them 10 times, they'd probably beat us 8 or 9 out of 10 times in a duel.
Yeah.
But in a tournament, other things happen. You know how that goes. So
you beat them by a point at Dvorak?
Yeah, we beat them by a point in the Dvorak, and then we beat them and then we won the Clash, but we lost to them. Now we rested 1 or 2 of our guys that were hurt. We had one kid get injured. Guy, you know, Danny Stelter was injured in that match, and so we rested a couple of those guys, but it didn't matter. You know, I don't like to use that as an excuse. We knew that was the worst matchup for us. And they were looming, you know, that still to this day was our highest ranked national finish, you know, as I coached, I should say. I think that year we ended up 5th in the country, and Sandburg finished 4th in the country, and they won the state title and we finished 2nd. And I believe our young men, 2 years, I think the last 2 years we finished 4th. So that's the highest ranking, but we've had a couple of top 5 finishes, but we just couldn't, and they won 3 straight state titles, and they were a fantastic team, well coached and tough as nails, you know, and those kids were great kids. So we, you know, again, I look back at that and people always say, oh, you know, how do you feel? That was, you know, arguably your best team and you didn't win. Did you choke? And I said, guys, I'm going to tell you, it just was such a tough matchup with our guys. We had a young 2 guys down low, and they no matter what we did to bump or try to, you know, Morrison was an absolute beast.
Oh my God.
Down there. So, you know, we had a kid named Colton Rashi, you know, gosh, I can't even remember if it was 106 or 103 that year.
That was still 103.
Okay, so it was 103. We had a really good 103 pounder. Colton ended up being a state champion for us. He wrestled at the Naval Academy, but he was young. And Morrison, I mean, we went out there and we just hoped we didn't get majored. You know, we were hanging on. And if we tried to, you know, bump Colton, they had a really big physical 112-pounder, a kid by the name of Guerrero, I think. And Colton would not have matched up. So we could not get a win, at the first two weights, no matter what we did, and that was a tough thing. And then the other thing that we had that year, our heavyweight that year, was Garrett Goebel.
Oh,
and Garrett Goebel could pin 99.9% of the kids in the state of Illinois, but he couldn't pin this kid, their heavyweight named Retsky. Finished third in the state that year. And this kid had one of those bodies that was a rubber arm. You couldn't wing him. He slipped out of everything. He was a tough kid, and we couldn't get those extra bonus points. And so those things, we couldn't get around those things. And they really were the doom, and that's really what happened.
So when you guys actually met at the team state, did it come down to like a last match, or was the way it was set up, it was out of hand early?
No, they the big thing they did was, we had earlier in the week, this was before a lot of weigh-in rules and were applied to the duel. We got everybody down a weight class because, people forget, Columbard North was an unbelievably good team that year. And we did everything we could to beat them here at Montini in the sectional final. And so we had got our guys down a weight because we needed to find an extra win against them. And they were a fantastic team at that time. So we had everything we could do. So we had our guys down a weight. And so, we were able to move some guys around. They won a coin flip, and they by winning the coin flip, they got away from Mike Benefiel. They bumped up Preto and went up, and they won that match. We knew if we lost that coin flip, they were going to get away from Mikey, and that's the way duels come down to. Sometimes that. So it's all about matchups. So yeah.
I mean, for people who aren't from Illinois, and there's a lot of folks listening who aren't. Carl Sandburg, what are they, like 35 miles south of you guys?
Yeah.
Southwest
right
suburbs.
That. Yep.
Just absolute hammer of a program, coached by one of the greats, Mike Poles and Eric Siebert. I know they're all retired now. But.
Yeah, both. But and so now one of Mike's sons is the head coach there. Not the one. I think Clinton. Clinton is the head coach. I believe they're Clinton Poles. Conrad's the one that wrestled at U of I.
Yeah.
And Clinton, I think, his older brother. He's the coach there. And they were just a tremendous program. And Mike's had success wherever he was. He was at Providence. He was part of that big run there. And, so it was great competition. And, but you're right. We actually won the Cheesehead tournament that year. We won the Dvorak that year. We won the Clash that year. And we finished fourth in the Ironman that year. And we didn't win a state title. So it shows you, which shows you how good Illinois wrestling is, and so, and I tell you what, winning the Dvorak, that was a great story. Our heavyweight, Garrett Goebel, beat a kid from Mount Carmel named Christian Brantley in the finals in, overtime ride out. Okay. And that put us 1 point ahead. That's how we had to win the Dvorak. It came down to us in Sandburg, the last match of the whole tournament. And then Brantley ended up get away from Goebel, and he wanted to prepare for college. He went down and cut down to 220 at the time. So didn't wrestle heavyweight for the state series.
I was looking at some of the stats. I didn't realize Goebel has the most wins ever. I mean, that guy was just incredible.
Yeah, he had 201 career wins. Mike Benefiel was right there with 200. Mike had broke his hand his sophomore year and missed the Ironman. His junior year. I'm sorry. His sophomore year, he won the Ironman and missed the Ironman, and then missed probably about 8 to 10 matches that he would have. I think obviously he would have been. So him and Garrett, every once in a while, they have a little bit of a, they have a little bit of a contest about that. But yeah, Garrett was an unbelievable heavyweight because he could wrestle on top. He was so good on top. And his younger brother Grant won a state title for us at 189 pounds, actually at 215, I should say, excuse me. And again, just fantastic, just hammers on top, just total hammers. And they could turn almost anybody, and they did.
So we've talked about one-year greats in Goebel. We got to talk about Mike Benefiel. He was the same grade as me, and from 5th grade on, he won everything there was. And you talk about winning the Ironman as a sophomore. That's ridiculous. He was so good. What do you remember from his dominance?
Well, Mike was, obviously a very talented young man, but Mike was a worker. That was one of the fun things about coaching Mike Benefiel. I mean, he worked his butt off. That kid, he was one of those kids, he'd leave the wrestling room and, he was going to get another workout in either at night or in the morning. And he was one of the guys, he did a lot of wrestling down at the Wildcat Wrestling Club, when that was in existence down there with at Northwestern, and with Jake Herbert. down there. And, Mike was just, a beast that way. So when you have that talent and you have, that drive, which he did, it makes you a very special young man. And he really was. And he was just a guy that I think his career record offhand, I think was 200 wins and 4 losses, and he never, he lost, I think 3 matches his freshman year. Actually, no, he lost 2 his freshman year and 2 his sophomore year. And really a unbelievable story about his sophomore year is we were at the Dvorak tournament and Mike lost in the winners bracket, lost in the quarterfinal, I believe, to a kid named Tharp out of Morton High School. Okay. And he was a state place winner, I think, later year, and huge upset. Well, the same tournament in the same bracket, Albert White from St. Rita, who obviously became a 4-timer, got upset. So Mike Benefiel beat Albert White 5-1 in the 3rd place match at the Dvorak tournament that year. Everybody would just, it was just unbelievable. So, and, Mike, he just was such a special guy, and he lost that tournament, and he had a health issue. I can't remember what it was. He wasn't 100%. And, he was supposed to wrestle Albert, and I started talking to Mike, and I was always a big one about, hey, you got to be smart about. He would have no part of it. Coach, I'm wrestling this match because I need to wrestle this match. I got to beat that kid to go home satisfied. I lost here. I can't. Winning 3rd place or defaulting 3rd place isn't going to let me sleep tonight. I got to beat, who I think is what maybe the other best kid in the whole tournament. So he did. That's how Mikey was.
So that wasn't even a thought in his mind, defaulting out.
No. To me, I'm trying to be a coach and trying to be an adult and say, hey, listen, you're not 100%. Let's not make a mistake here and get hurt worse or whatever. He didn't think that way. Mike, that was shot down real quick.
You talk about, I forgot about that Albert White match. My God, how tough was he?
Yeah.
But what about the Blanton match? I'm actually interviewing Blanton later tonight. Can you remember a bigger hype for a finals match than that one?
No, and I'm going to tell you something. I've been very fortunate in my career. I've coached in, tons of state championship events. I think 19 or 20 games, matches, or whatever. And I don't think I've ever been as nervous as I was leading up to that. Now, Richmond Burton was just coming on. Jordan was a fantastic wrestler. And I was getting letters in the mail once a week, twice a week from somebody up there just with newspaper articles about Jordan Blanton. Jordan Blanton's unscored on. Jordan Blanton this, Jordan Blanton. So it was like I was getting these every week, and they were coming to school, and I'm reading these and I'm following him. And here he is, he wins another tournament and nobody scored on him. And he did this and he did good kids. And so, we get into that tournament and, obviously Mike came through and had to win a tough match against the Sandburg kid in the quarters. I think he won 3-0. And, I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is just, and then everywhere you go, you go to the gas station at 5:30 in the morning, the day of weigh-in to get the weigh-in food for the guys and get bagels or whatever. And there's somebody talking about that match. Oh, coach, that's going to be a big one. I'm driving, and finally you want to say, would you just shut up? I know how big it's going to be. And I have, Israel and I were sitting in the chair for that match. And when Mike hit him, with that fireman's right off the whistle, I was literally in the chair next to Israel Martinez, and we could not hear each other's voices. That is how loud I've never experienced sound like that in my life. The place almost blew off the roof, and we were screaming at each other, and we couldn't be heard, and it was just unbelievable. And by the way, I'm going to personally make a little plea to everyone out there. I made a huge coaching mistake, and I signed a sophomore to film the finals that night. And he got so excited when Mikey's match started, he left the lens cap on. Oh. So I do not have a video of Mike Benefiel, and I hate to do this to Jordan because he's a great kid, but I'd pay him if he has a copy of that match.
I'm asking him for it tonight.
You're going to have to. So he might throw something at you. I don't know, but Jordan was such a, and I knew Jordan. I got to know him later, and what a class A. And you talk about just, he had every chance in the world to avoid Mike, to go down, to go wake, all these things, go up. He just was such, I knew that kid was destined for greatness, and he, being a multiple All-American and Illinois boy, he deserved everything he got. He was just a tremendous, tremendous young man.
What a hammer. And this is style. He was such and the next year he wrestled Spangler in the semis, which
was that a great match, huh?
Incredible.
Unbelievable.
So you were, going into the match though, Benefiel was the favorite, slight favorite, but you were that nervous though, huh?
Oh yeah, I was. You look at the biggest thing as a coach, and I've always felt this way, is, you have expectations, you have things that you're supposed to do. My joke about Mike Benefiel is, hey, just get out of his way and don't mess this up. Don't mess this kid up. And the same thing with the BBs, and the same thing with all the other great kids that I've had a chance to coach, football, wrestling, whatever. You kind of have that feeling like you have to make sure that's what you're going to be judged on. You're going to be judged on, and people are going to remember, you always remember those matches downstate. You just mentioned one of them where, somebody doesn't perform, or this happens or whatever. And, as coaches, as fans, we've watched those for years. How many times, when you see a kid that's a very talented kid and they run out of gas and can't go 6 minutes, as a coach, how you feel, because guess what? That's on you, and those are the things that, and I remember Jordan's style was really what made me very nervous, because he was relentless, and how it is down there, and they're still teenage boys. They're still 18-year-olds, and a pressure can affect. I don't care if Mike Benefiel's been, stone cold assassin his whole, you don't know what's going to happen. This last match, everything's on him. What happens if he, Dan Gable lost? Hell, you just don't know. That's what we love about this sport. And so, that was just a time when Mike really, and just, it was a very neat moment, with him. And I'll tell you what, this is, I hate to keep going on like this, but one story leads to another.
Please.
But what I'll remember about Mike Benefiel forever is the next Tuesday we needed to wrestle Glenbard North. Okay. And Glenbard North, like we said, we were searching for that one win. So Mike Benefiel won the, state championship that night at 171 pounds, and within 3 hours was on a bike in the exercise room of the old Chancellor Hotel, cutting weight, because he was going to weigh in for the team Tuesday night at 160 pounds. And he needed to do that. And that's who Mike Benefiel was. So there was no steak dinner. There was no celebration. That's what Mike Benefiel meant to the team. Coach, and him and I talked about it. Mike, I don't want you thinking one bit about Tuesday night until you get done wrestling. If you step on the mat at 178 pounds, because that's what you normally do when you weigh in the morning and you do this, I don't want one iota of that sacrificed. And we're going to see what you weigh after the match, and then we're going to figure it out, and he just said, hey, coach, I'll do it. I got to do what I got to do, and I'll do it. And that's what he did. And that's the kind of kid he was. And so that made that night even more special for me.
I can't believe Glenbard North was that tough.
They were good.
They had like Jimmy Chase and Ramos.
Oh,
and those guys.
Chase and the Ramos brothers, and they had Danny Monaco. They had Gino Capizio, wrestled in Indiana. They had a couple of those guys. Now the thing with Glenbard North is where we always chased them a little bit, where I always made up some hay, was for whatever reason they weren't always strong in the upper weights. They always had a couple of just solid kids in the upper weights, but their lineup through 160 in those years was as good as we've ever seen. It was fun. It was as good as Sandburg. And then, Sandburg would always have a couple of big hammers up top and be a little bit more balanced all the way through. But, once we got to the AA days, that was our neighborhood pal. Glenbard North is, 15 minutes down the road. That's who we were chasing, and so once we got, kind of a little bit past Sandwich and Plano and Harvard and those guys, now it became Glenbard North, and it became Sandburg and, those schools, and those were the next ones we had to target.
Was there a tougher division than Illinois 2A when you guys were in it those last couple of years?
Rob Sherrill, who I have a lot of respect for and does the, Illinois Map Man and the rankings and all that. And I can't figure out who's politically aligned with anyone now anymore. So if I just offended somebody, Mike's a great friend of mine too, Mike Bear. And the bottom line is, Rob Sherrill made a comment once that said a 2A state title was one of the most coveted state titles in the entire country. And I think there was some truth to that. I really do. I mean, you look at the list of guys that have gone, like Steve Marinetti, was a national champion, beat Lincoln McElravy in the national champion match and never won a state title in Illinois.
Right.
Guys like that. I mean, it just was unbelievable to win that title. And so that 2A class, you're right. I mean, and that was a big point of, we knew in 2008 when we finally broke through, we knew that the multiplier happened and bumped us up there, but we also knew that multiple classes was coming, and we were on the clock. We wanted to win a title when everybody was there, so that was a big motivation after that loss in 2007.
Yeah, and for folks who don't know, Illinois went to a 3-class system in 2009. I withhold my opinions on it, but obviously there was nothing better than 2A 24-man brackets, double elimination.
Right.
Get out of here.
It was crazy.
Unseeded, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Unseeded, by the way, is right. You think about all those quarterfinal matches, and I'm still, a fan of the old. I remember Friday night in Assembly Hall.
Both classes together.
It was just and you saw unbelievable matches in the energy in that place. In some years, it was there was more energy Friday night than there was Saturday night, in my opinion.
Almost every year,
or it seemed like that. Like it was just, and people, and even some of the people that maybe had to work a half a day or whatever, they would fly down to Champaign, gun it down there to get there for that 6 p.m. Friday night quarterfinal, and boy, that was just something, and my gosh, the Joey Gilbert match, when he wrestled the kid out of Sterling, I think his name was, I can't remember his name. He was a one-timer or a two-timer that was out of Sterling High School, and that was a big quarterfinal match when Joey Gilbert got taken down and then pinned him in the first period, and place went bananas.
So many.
Ed Geesey, when Ed Geesey lost in the quarterfinals that night, I mean, that was just kid from Ed was one of the most decorated wrestlers in all of Illinois, but it was crazy times Friday night.
Oh my God, nothing better. Now you talk about one of the best of all time ever come through Illinois. Israel Martinez is right up there. How did you get in contact with him and bring him on board?
Well, I met Israel the first time when he was in third grade. And Israel as a third grader is exactly what you think Israel as a third grader would have been, And, Israel is a kid that, he's accomplished a lot in his life. And, he really became a student of the game. And Israel will be the first one to tell you, he's a little bit unconventional. And at times in his life, Israel's been his own worst enemy. But there is no one that I have ever seen or met or worked with that has a bigger passion, for the sport of wrestling than Israel Martinez, and that's what I saw in him. So, he finished his high school career, and his father actually came and set up shop with the Martinez Elite Wrestling Club over here at Montini, and that was a big
game changer,
game changer for us, so that was a big part. So Israel was always around his father and his brother Nate, and they were training all the time. And so I got to know this kid, and he went on to college and struggled, and went to Iowa and got in a little bit of trouble there and learned his lessons. And one of the things that I always thought was very good about Israel, and still to this day, is that he can tell a story, and he can look these kids in the eye, and he can tell them, and he does tell them, listen, I blew it. I was maybe arguably the best wrestler to ever come out of the state of Illinois, and I didn't have a college career, and I had to go through the back channels, and I had to do this and do that, to get it right. And he did, and I think that was one of the reasons why I thought that it would be good to give him a chance. And so once he got done and wrestling in college, and then he went out and won a junior national title at Idaho Junior College. Mm-hmm. He came back to Illinois, was working with the club. And so I brought him on the staff, and, again, he was a great wealth of knowledge, for all of us. And as technician go, I don't know if there's a better one in the country. I mean, I'm sure, obviously I don't have any more connection to college wrestlers and rooms and things like that as I used to, but, I saw him as one of the best, and he really, helped our program, when he was here. And obviously when I stepped down, he talked to me, and I don't think he really ever had plans of doing that. I don't think I thought he was destined for that either, when he kind of came to me and said, yeah, it was never a pre-designed thing. Everybody might think that, but it was like I thought he was going to go his own way. He was big with the club then. And
was Izzy style going then?
Yeah, he had just started it. When he came on with me, I told him, I said, listen, we have a wrestling club here, and I need you to run it. I want to give it to you. You're going to run it. The Junior Bronco Club, blah 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 blah, and then he asked me if he could change the name and start doing his own thing. I said, yeah, as long as you take care of us and you're respectful of our school and make sure Montini, quote unquote, gets top billing, get, we're not running a wrestling club over here for fun,
right.
to go feed all these other schools here. So, I want my guys to be focused and those kind of things. And he did a great job with that. And then he kind of obviously took it to another level with the club and all that kind of thing. So, so Israel was a guy, that was instrumental in our program. I mean, we had had success before he got here. I think we won 5 state titles before he ever started coaching us, but he was always working with a lot of our kids down below and all that. So, he just became one of those guys that as I tell people all the time, love him or hate him, he has changed the face of wrestling, in the state of Illinois, and in a lot of different ways. And that's a fact.
And we love him on this show. I am, a huge fan. I just love his passion and his excitement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another guy I got to ask you about that was legendary during my day, Pat McCaffrey. Let's talk about Pat. Like, what do you remember about that phenomena that came through Montini?
Well, I'll tell you this, and this is great because people will, being a Montini guy and you being from Geneseo, I know there's a lot of old-fashioned folks in Geneseo that have a lot to say about Catholic schools and those kind of things. That's just, there was always those kind of rivalries, and we laugh about that. So the extent of me recruiting Patrick McCaffrey, and I'm going to be 1,000% honest about this, the first time I ever saw Patrick McCaffrey in person was the first day of school, his freshman year. And I went out to the track because I saw this short, and at the time he was wearing a Penn State wrestling sweatshirt. He was a little chubby. He was off season, and he was running around the track. And I walked out and I said, Penn State, who are you? And he said, well, my name is Patrick McCaffrey. And I knew that this kid had transferred in because he went out to Fargo and he wrestled for Team Pennsylvania, lived out in Pennsylvania. His father was a retired Green Beret. Okay, so I don't mind telling you, his father was passionate. Does not describe the word. It's 6 levels higher. Okay, in terms of the things that Patrick's father kind of made him do, and so Patrick was used to having a lot of pressure on him. So I knew this kid was coming because out in Fargo, his father was such a wrestling nut. He ran into the Beebe family. Okay, and I had the 4, BBs here wrestle, and they were great kids, and just fantastic family, and actually the daughter came here too, and so while they were out at Fargo, okay, the BBs convinced Patrick McCaffrey's father to move to Glen Ellen, all right, and he was actually in the process of moving in the Chicagoland area because of a job transfer. And moved to Glen Ellen, and he told them that he was thinking about going to Mount Carmel because he thought that was the best program in the state of Illinois. And when they mentioned Montini to him, he never heard of Montini. He didn't know where Montini was or existed. I believe this was 2003, if I'm not mistaken. And so the BBs convinced him to transfer. And this all happens within a week and a half. Okay, this is unbelievable. God. So this guy uproots, moves, gets the kid here. He had 2 sisters that also went to school here, in even years. And so he comes in as a freshman, and he's obviously has a very seasoned kid, and
freshman or a sophomore?
He was a freshman. He was a freshman. He came here. Now, I think he was 26 years old as a freshman, to be honest with you. I'm not really sure, not that old, but Patrick had been around a little bit. Patrick actually had an experience when he was in 7th grade. He trained in Siberia. Okay, think about this. He trained in Siberia. He tells a story. His father put him on a plane out of New York, and he flew to Russia. And he told me, Coach, I was in bed in a 2-room shack with a strange Russian man that I had never met in my life, sleeping by the end of that night. And that's how my 6 months or 3 months, whatever it was, in Siberia started. And so, yeah, he was quite the guy. And so Patrick was just a phenomenal, he was a very talented kid, but Patrick didn't always look like his nickname, we called him Pork Chop. He was a kid. He wasn't a lean cut, type of guy. He was very strong and very athletic and extremely talented, but Patrick was, and he was one of the funniest kids I ever coached. I mean, this kid
really,
he was really a handful. And as you can maybe guess, having an upbringing like that, Patrick looked for any type of a escape he could find every once in a while. And let's just leave it at that.
And how good was he though? I mean, he was
a Fargo national champ. I think he won Fargo at 98. That him and Mike Benefiel were both cadet national champions. Mikey coming in as a freshman and him. And so that was an unbelievable situation. And the problem was when he was a sophomore, he transferred out and moved to, he was homeschooled in Iowa and lived with a kid named TJ Seabolt, if you remember him, nationally ranked kid. And he just trained. Yeah. And he went out to Iowa, and I think he won a couple titles out there. And then he ended up at the Naval Academy. One year I was out at Fargo watching a couple guys of mine wrestle, and I'm out there and it was in between, rounds or whatever. And the Olympic Training Center team came over and started drilling, and there he was. He was on a mat. I ran down and said, Patrick, coach, what are you, he was out there training and, in Colorado Springs. And so they were there doing some kind of exhibition or something. So he bounced around a little bit and was a super smart kid. And, but he kind of was destined to be one of those guys that was going to move on. But when he was here, he won some big matches for us. He was a pretty good wrestler, no doubt.
I'll never I was a freshman at Dvorak his first year there. We were all at 103. He tech followed John Starzik in the finals, and yes, John Starzik was a 3-time state champ, and I was blown. I was like, who the hell is this kid?
Well, he was unbelievable. Well, that's a funny story because one of the matches you mentioned before, Mr. Spangler, when his sons wrestled, they were right down the street here at Neuqua Valley, and let's just say there was a very big rivalry between the Spanglers and the BBs and a lot of the other families that ended up. So it was so Patrick was wrestling, and my longtime assistant, John Bukovsky, who for my money is the best coach, in the state of Illinois, just a fantastic guy, really helped me to get to the next level with the program. And John was Mark Spangler, helped coach both of Mark Spangler's sons when they were young in the old Fox Valley Wrestling Club, and then later. So Mark and John kind of knew each other, and they had, they were getting a little bit on the soft. So Mr. Spangler walked up behind us, and as Patrick was wrestling the match before he was going to wrestle his son, Mr. Spangler loudly proclaimed, he said, "Oh boy," he said, "we got no problem. We're going to carve up this little pork chop. We're going to carve this little pork chop." He said it about 6 times. So when Patrick teched his son,
in the semis,
in the semifinals, our kids just let loose, and so they called him Pork Chop for the rest of his life because of that. So, and Mr. Spangler was standing right behind John and I. This was a Dundee Crown, and he was ready just to wolf on us as soon as his son got him. Lo and behold, about halfway through the second period, Mr. Spangler wasn't there anymore. He disappeared somewhere in the darkness because, old Pork Chop was taking his kid to the woodshed.
These are the antics that we grew up with, though. Yeah, and you're exactly right. Oh, my God.
So Patrick was Patrick would wear this backpack every time we had a grand march. And everyone wanted to know what was in the backpack, and there was nothing in the backpack. And he told me he learned this from some All-American at Ohio State that told him if you wear a backpack, everyone will be so consumed with what's in the backpack, they'll be distracted. And so Patrick used to do these goofy things like that all the time. So he was a character, but boy, was he talented. He was a tough kid.
So there's so many stories that I want to hit on, but we're gonna wrap it up here. But I don't want to leave anyone sliding. The BBs, Carson Beebe's one of my favorites, and Chris DeVito is one of my best friends. He wrestled with you, and so there's too many stories to hit on. But one thing I have to ask about is you're now the head coach at Montini. What is the Chicago football landscape like in terms of competitiveness on a national scale? Is it right there?
I think a lot of that has to do with position, to be honest with you. It's long been kind of an axiom that, upper level schools will recruit running backs and skill guys out of the southern states. And it's something that if you look at, one of the things that I know that you and I both celebrate is that, take wrestling, for example, Illinois has had an upswing, in the national wrestling scene. And really, I think the biggest reason for that upswing is because, years ago, the summer program, the IKWF, USA Wrestling, all those guys that work out. I mean, our summer program with the creation of the cadet junior and national junior and cadet duels, and Greco do a freestyle, all of these things have brought this competition together. Our schools, lack of reluctance now schools are getting out and competing. So we're narrowing the gap. Now we haven't seen that pay off yet in All-Americans. I know that's a stat that still drives me crazy that,
me
Pennsylvania,
too,
it's going to come, because that was also a thing, Ryan, for years, was style. Illinois for many years was a cut and release state, and that style was something that, I personally, I can blame Israel Martinez for that, because he became so good at it. And, that was the easiest way, was to be able to outscore your opponent in 2 out of the 3 areas, and you're going to win matches. You're going to win state titles. And so top wrestling became non-focused on, in our state. And as looking at the next level, that's the difference, is those college wrestlers, those All-Americans and national champions are able to wrestle, hard in all 3 phases. So I think wrestling has that blueprint. Football, in my opinion, has got to follow a little bit. Our state association kind of limits us. There's Georgia, Alabama, they have spring football. They have year-round things that kids can do. Now, I know that's kind of a crazy thing, because I'm a big proponent of multiple sport athletes, but I also am a big proponent that sooner or later, if you want to have that, if you want to be a Mike Benefiel, if you want to be one of the elite guys, a guy that we just had at Montini that's been in the news, Real Woods. If you want to be one of those guys, you got to have the opportunity to do that. And they do in wrestling. They can wrestle year-round in wrestling. In football, though, it's hard, because they don't have that opportunity to compete year-round. And that's why I think football sometimes lacks a little bit, especially in those skill, production areas, because our kids just don't get as much work. They're not allowed to improve their skills year round.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, obviously IKWF is huge, and I knew that Montini, you got, how many football state titles have you guys racked up now?
Montini has won 6 football titles in our career. Our first one was in 2004.
Got it. So you guys are still, and you're still the head coach there. We'd love to see you back in wrestling, but I understand it's a time involved sport.
Yeah.
Last question for you, Coach, is when you look back on your career coaching, what's the biggest lesson you take away from just being an educator and a coach for 25, 30 years?
Well, I think, a thing I learned a long time ago from my mentors, and the thing I really try to harp on the young men and women that I've coached, over the years, is that I think wrestling, to me, I love the name of your podcast, Wrestling Change Your Life. It did for me. And how it did was it gave me the tools, it gave me the drive that I applied to all the other areas of my life. I never became an elite wrestler, but one of the things that I am able to do is any success I've had in anything that I've done professionally, even personally in my personal life, is because of that mentality that I carry with me, that work ethic. And I think, that as a wrestler, you take pride in that. It's almost a weird sense of pride. We take pride in doing things the hard way. We don't take shortcuts as wrestlers. And even a wrestler who was not an elite wrestler, who wasn't a national champion or wasn't that, I can look at a kid, I was fortunate to spend some time around Tony Ramos, as he was in our freestyle club and all that. And I see Tony's climb to be a national champion. Well, that applies to Tony Ramos as much as it applies to a mediocre guy, on Montini or Glenbard North's team, because they're still trying to get the best out of what they can do. And I think that's what wrestling taught me. And I think that's the number one thing that I try to leave with everyone else is the process, how you become better, how you become happy in life. And I think that's really something that I know I learned from wrestling, and I try to take with me and exhibit everywhere I go and everything I do.
Coach Boo, you're the man, sir. I really appreciate this conversation, and I just want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been an honor.
Thank you, and thanks for all you do for wrestling. Guys like you are the backbone, of what we do here in this state, and I'm a big fan of what you're doing, and keep it up.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
And all great things must come to an end. If you want to hear more from the podcast, text Wrestle to 555-888. That's Wrestle to 555-888. You can also find us on Instagram, Wrestling Changed My Life, Twitter, Ryan_N_Warner, as well as our website, WrestlingChangedMyLife.com. Take care, y'all. 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 Take care.